Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Marketing Resilience, powered by data, presented by Claravine and Martech. I'm Mike Pastor, Editorial Director at Martech. And before we get started, I got just a couple of quick housekeeping things to go over with you. First of all, if you're having any audio issues, click on the audio icon on your screen. If you're having any viewing issues, you can use the Q&A section to communicate with us, and we'll try and get that straightened out for you. That's the same Q&A section where you're going to send questions and comments directly to the speakers about the presentation. You can do that at any time throughout the event. We will probably address questions at the end. And now it is time to introduce our speakers. Joining us today are a pair of leaders from Claravine. Ann Marlowski is the VP of Marketing at Claravine, and EJ Freeney is the Chief Revenue Officer. Almost gave you a promotion there at Claravine. Welcome to Ann and EJ. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn things over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Mike. We are really excited to be here. This is a topic that as a marketer, I have really near and dear to my heart. It's, we have, as all have experienced the last few years of volatility in the market, and data is where I really am able to see the best levels of success and where can I measure my impact. So really excited to bring this topic to everyone at Martech today. So we are going to be going through, first and foremost, why is marketing the team that is always experiencing budget cuts? Then we're going to dive into what are data standards and how do we utilize data standards as a part of the team at Claravine to see success? And then what is the role of AI in scaling those standards? And then how do you create a sustainable data standards workflow for yourself in the future? So we'll start first with, looking back at the last few years. I think everyone knows there's been a lot of volatility since 2020. 2020 is obviously, that's when the pandemic happened, and it was both the shortest and deepest recession in modern times. There was a brief recovery, but in 2021, we started to see widespread layoffs. And before teams started cutting their headcount, they were making significant cuts into their marketing budgets. And this has continued to go on since then. So now we are here in 2025, and we're seeing this global trade instability. We're seeing that different categories are being hit with different kinds of tariffs, and it's having an economic impact that's making us rethink our marketing budgets and understanding what we really need to be successful as marketers year after year. So looking at 2020 as an example, that was a time where the first thing to be cut is always going to be your marketing budget. And the primary reason for that is that until you start cutting headcount, marketing budget is one of the areas that you can go up or down with a dial most of the time. There are commitments that you're going to make that are locked in, but a very significant portion of your marketing budget is often considered variable spend. So you can cut those dollars and see what it's going to do for your business. So if we look at what happened in 2020, for example, Procter & Gamble is a fantastic example. They did not cut their marketing budget. They actually increased their marketing budget. So they increased their marketing budget, put their foot on the gas when everyone else was starting to pull back. And because they put their foot on the gas, they were able to see a 5% sales growth against their competitors who paused a lot of their advertising, saw double-digit revenue increases. So when you cut marketing too deeply, what you're damaging is your brand awareness, your customer relationships, and it becomes very challenging to capitalize when that demand returns. So despite knowing this and having this evidence, marketing continues to be a vulnerable area when there is need to cut dollars. 45% of cuts often come from marketing teams. So we're going to share how we see ways to make the most sustainable changes you can to your marketing plan to prepare yourself for those cuts when they do come down the pipe. So first and foremost, as marketers, there's a lot of budget scrutiny. Everybody knows that people are asking, hey, if you spend X, what's my ROI going to be? So now since 2020, there's been a different way of looking at that marketing spend. And we really need to be able to say, I know exactly how much return I'm going to get from every investment. So that's coming from your leadership. It's coming from your finance office. It's coming from your board. And so to be able to answer those questions, you have to be able to prove ROI and justify your budget. So the challenge that we see is that most organizations are not able to do that. We did a report last year where we were able to poll marketing brand leaders across a wide variety of enterprises and verticals. And they reported that only 30% of them were able to actually understand how their audiences were impacted across digital formats. So that means 70% of the dollars they put in market were just untraceable. They couldn't figure out what had actually happened with those dollars. And they're making their decisions off less than 50% of the data. They're having to make decisions about what do we think is working and isn't working with a very small data set, but it's the best data that they have available. There's only 16% of the people we surveyed were confident in their ability to track their campaign ROI to specific data sets, and only 13% can tie that campaign performance back to a creative asset. So that means that we're often flying blind. And that's not something that when you are looking at how do I find the most economic spend, how do I make the most value out of what I'm putting out in my budget, it means that we need to find a better way to track that information. So there is this fundamental disconnect between increased accountability coming from leadership, boards, your stockholders, all of that. They want to see that accountability, but there is no data infrastructure to support it. So it puts marketing leaders at a disadvantage, and it makes it really hard to have those conversations internally. So digging a little bit deeper, what we're seeing is that not having data quality creates a bigger problem that goes beyond just having a budget meeting or having a conversation with stakeholders. Companies that are estimating that their creative is reaching the wrong consumer 23% of the time. Think about how many times you've received an ad on Facebook or on a platform like a Google channel that doesn't apply to you. It doesn't fit your persona. It's not specific to your needs. Perhaps it's advertising something that you would never use in a million years. So that happens, and then you're having these wasted impressions and diminished performance because no one's clicking on that ad. It's creating, issues where we have data silos internally that make it really hard for teams to analyze which tactics are driving ROI. And it means that you might be utilizing your team members, the actual human resources behind that advertising campaign, incorrectly, because you're making decisions off of things that you don't actually know what's working and what's not working. Gartner last year, they estimated that poor data quality is costing organizations $12.9 million annually. So that is a ton of money to be wasting because you don't have the right data to back your decisions. And so when we're looking at, how do we come out of some economic uncertainty, it's really damaging to your brand because it's going to say, hey, marketing doesn't know what they're doing. And we all know that that's not true. McKinsey is advising marketing leaders to really start thinking about their budgets the same way that a CFO would, and to really think about where is the bad spend, what needs to be cut. And to be able to do that with precision, you need to have really good data standards and have a lot of confidence in the data on the back end. So our recommendation at Claravine is to be able to make those decisions, you need to implement a really robust set of data standards. And we're going to walk you through how you can do that at your company and get started.
Great. Thanks, Ann. So what's causing this chaos? Before we talk about data standards, MarTech does an incredible job of showing the complexity in the marketing world, the marketing organization. I think at this point, we're now up to over 15,000 different marketing applications and software companies that a marketer has to choose from. But in the 20 plus years I've been in this industry, we always talk about consolidation, but fragmentation is abound. And that's not just with technology. I mean, the average marketing organization has upwards of 120 different SaaS applications within their walls, but it's also people and teams fragmentation. So we'd love to think that a marketing campaign is this very linear thing where a piece of content gets created and it flows perfectly through all the way down to analytics. And that's often not the case. You have different teams, technologies, systems, structures in place. These are being done at a global organization. So unless a company really hunkers down and focuses on a data strategy and specifically data standards, they're really going to have a tough time making the decisions and making the case for marketing budget, especially when times are really, really challenging. So what are these things that we're talking about data standards? We like to bucket them in a couple different categories. There are many things to many people, but really ultimately data standards are really focused on metadata, the context around the data about the data. How do you give business context to an incredibly complex data set? It might be experiences that you're reaching your customers and your prospects, the folks that are actually launching campaigns internally, creative assets, content, the experiences that you're delivering out on an infinitesimal amount of channels, the products, the campaigns, a number of different things. Again, it's all about the context and specifically your business context about the data that you're capturing. And then it's about what data standards can facilitate as far as capabilities. So you think about link structures, naming conventions, taxonomy, tagging, tracking, data mapping, data relationships, data governance. Our customers like to think about data standards as either their playbook for a common data language or just a way to create collaboration and consistency across that incredibly fragmented world that we talked about on the slide before. And data standards help create sustainable frameworks. So to really simplify this, when you have a great data standards practice in place and you've invested in this and you have your organization on board, it's going to help you do many things, but really three core things, especially in times when it's a little bit of a roller coaster in the marketplace right now. Number one, it's going to increase your visibility into what's working and what's not working. And Anne touched on this a number of times in her intro, but now more than ever, marketing campaigns are getting scrutinized. We're being asked to do more with less. Brands and their partners are being asked to do more with less to get more efficient than ever. So being able to see what's working at the atomic level, even down to not just the channel, but the audience or the creative, is more important than ever. Reduced redundancy. So time and time again, we talk to some of the largest marketers in the world, and it feels like they're recreating the wheel over and over again. Simple things like finding a piece of content or a creative asset that might have been created before that's working really, really well becomes incredibly difficult when your digital asset management platform has 500,000 assets and there's no data standard in place. So searchability becomes almost impossible. You can't find the things that you want. So you recreate it, again, costing these big global organizations millions and millions of dollars annually. And then data standards create a complete look at your data. I touched on this a little bit before, but imagine a world where you can look at not just the campaign and the line item level and understand, okay, this is the channel that's performing the best out of everything I'm doing. Let's optimize and put more money in there. But also, what's the messaging? What's the creative? What's the minutia around the creative that tells me that this is a message that's going to resonate better? Is there a dog, a car, a sun, happiness in the ad? All of those things give you a complete look of the data, and all of those are facilitated by having a data standards practice in place. And data standards create collaboration and connections across your team. So we talked about that crazy world of fragmentation. All of you marketers watching this and the partners that are involved in marketers, agencies and consultants and systems integrators, you're probably working across a number of different constituents and different teams. You might be focused on strategy or creative and content. Maybe it's customer experience. Maybe you're deploying billions of media budget, paid, owned, and earned budgets. Or maybe you're the analytics and the data science team that is the beneficiary of all this data and the folks that really, really want the data in a structured standard format so they can make decisions. Well, all of these folks are in different systems. We mentioned that the average marketing organization has 120 SaaS applications. And then when you look at it at the people level, different constituents across the marketing world, both in-house and in outsourced partners, they have access to different data. So having this common data language, this data standard foundation in place, it's going to facilitate a level of collaboration, connectivity, but also the ability to analyze and make swift decisions like you've never been able to do before. So what's the cost of inaction? A lot of folks think, wow, this is a really daunting task. And it can be, but there's always a very simple first step to take. And the cost of inaction, it can be, in addition to being tens of millions of dollars a year, as Anne mentioned in her intro, these are four core reasons why data standards just cannot wait. Number one is budget vulnerability. We operate in a world now that at any moment your CFO or a marketing exec could pick up the phone or send you a Slack and say, hey, what's working, what's not working? We need to make some cuts here. So if you can't defend what is working and what isn't working, and it's going to take you weeks and weeks and weeks, sometimes months to gather that data, all of your budget's going to be vulnerable. So being able to have clean, consistent data and insights due to data standards is going to be vital. Slow response rate. So, we live, part of the promise of Marta marketing is to make real-time decisions, real-time optimizations. But again, if you don't have a common data layer and a consistent data standard practice in place, it's going to be really difficult to make those real-time decisions and respond. When we were at the height of the pandemic, we worked with a lot of marketers that were simply just trying to figure out where campaigns were running and what creative was running. Imagine if you had, tens of millions of dollars of campaigns out in the marketplace and you didn't know which ones were running where, and you couldn't pull things out in the time of some sort of crisis, right? So slow response can really cripple organizations. It puts you at a competitive disadvantage. We always like to operate under the assumption that if we're not doing it, we're not innovating, somebody else is. The same can be true for a marketer. So the marketers that we work with that have data standards in place, they're clearly thinking more progressively. They're making quick decisions. They're making very fundamental decisions with great data, which leads to the next pillar that we're going to talk about. It really limits your AI potential. And we've been talking about for years that data is the new oil. Data is the fuel for all things marketing. Well, in this new world of AI and machine learning, data and data standards are even more important. And we're going to dive into that for a couple slides. So very simply, metadata and data standards, they give you dependable data for AI decisioning. So as we move to this world where everybody is testing and thinking about, and probably has deployed some sort of AI, machine learning, I'm sure you're all using LLMs in some capacity, but data is more fundamentally important than ever. You need clean, enriched metadata from the start. Again, we've talked about metadata quite a bit, but that's the business context, the data about the data. We'll talk about this in the next slide about the importance and the impact that metadata is going to have on your LLM output and AI in general. But having clean, enriched metadata from the start is so important. Having robust and accurate data across teams and tools. We talked about just as much of the struggle as it is the fragmentation about tools. You've got teams, and many of you that are watching this webinar have teams all over the world. Or even if you just have teams in one country, they may be siloed, they may be fragmented. So you need to have dependable data across all those teams to fuel your AI. And then this is an adage that everybody's talked about for years, but the models are only going to be as good as the data that fuels the models. So you want to avoid garbage in and garbage out. If you're feeding LLMs and AI with inaccurate data or data that has little to no context, of course you're going to get output that isn't going to really help you drive the business decisions with the accuracy that you need. And underlying all this is, as I just said, models are only as good as the metadata that they are built on. And there have been countless studies of this, but we like this study from AtScale in particular. Our friends at Snowflake, who obviously deal with massive amounts of data at scale, had sent this to us a couple weeks ago. And really what this is showing is that regardless of how low the complexity of a question that you're asking an LLM or how high the complexity is, having metadata, having context about the data and the query and the data set that you're actually using is fundamentally important. I mean, imagine a world, we've all done this. If you just drop a spreadsheet into an LLM with no context about it and a bunch of random numbers, the output is probably going to be pretty inaccurate. But if you drop that same data set into an LLM with some context about what the data means, that this random 7-digit number isn't just an ID, it's a phone number or something else, the output is going to be significant. You see on the far right to the slide, regardless of whether it's a low complex question or an incredibly high complex question, there is a massive improvement in your performance when you have metadata and context around the data and frankly, data standards in place. And the bottom line fundamentally is detailed metadata is absolutely essential for the success of AI models. We all, and I'd argue that everybody that's watching this webinar is dealing with an incredibly complex set of data. And that incredibly complex set of data is created because of this fragmented world that we live in with all the consumer choices and all the different ways to reach your prospect and your customer. So would you want to live in a world where your AI output is 0% accurate or upwards of 70% plus approaching 100%, all because you have a data standard practice in place and all because you are feeding context and metadata into the LLMs with the data set that you have? With that, I'm going to hand it over to Anne, and she's going to talk about how do we implement a data standards framework in practice.
So For most people, starting a data standards practice isn't something that you haven't tried to do. You probably have some aspect of data standards somewhere within your systems, but you may be struggling to roll it out. You may be struggling to get adoption outside of a few individuals. You may be capturing information that you don't necessarily need to broaden that reach. So looking at your data standards practice from the get-go, we want to think about, okay, we're going to take this from a crawl, walk, run approach. If we want to look at our current state, let's evaluate what data is being collected. What information are we getting out of our various channels? Or what information are we trying to send into our DAM? What information is going to help our finance team understand the importance of what we're doing? You want to look at all of that, understand what data you can capture and what are you capturing today. Then look at, where does all of that data live? It's probably in disparate systems. It could be inside a marketing automation platform. It could be inside an email distribution platform. It could be inside all of your different advertising channels. It could sit on the hard drive of someone at an agency that you're working with. So where does all of it live? And what level of consistency are you seeing today? So thinking about an audit of all of the different things is a great place to understand, okay, what do I need to do to improve this? Once you have that audit, we really recommend identifying who the key stakeholders are in your data. Who is impacted outside of marketing by the data that you produce? Is it your IT department because they're utilizing that information for compliance or for tracking customers? Is it your analytics department because they're actually the ones providing that information back to the various teams and stakeholders? Is it your finance team? All of that is very important. Understand who's impacted and then what their priorities are. So documenting for finance, what they're looking for is they want to understand what money we put in and what money we get out. It may vary for your finance team, but that's pretty typical, right? For analytics, they want to make sure that they have confidence in the quality and they don't want to have disparate reports that maybe you're producing and sharing with stakeholders that are not consistent with the reports they're producing. So figuring out what are the priorities for each of those teams. And that can be a lot of work at first, but it's really important to making sure that your output is going to be something that everyone can see success in. Next, we recommend that's where you start to develop that standard framework. So if you look at those priorities and you map those priorities back to your ability to measure ROI, because ultimately to be able to protect your marketing budget or secure additional marketing budget, you need to be able to show ROI. So we recommend focusing on the items in that priority list that are most related to ROI. Then you would develop your data dictionary. So understanding, what is your taxonomy for each channel? What is your taxonomy for campaigns, for contents, for audience segments, for products? What are the things that you need to socialize across a broader group to make sure that you're getting the consistency that you need? Then document it. It can't be something that lives only in your head or in a couple of trainings that you host. It needs to be something that sits in a place that everyone has access to it and they understand the importance of what you're trying to achieve. Once you have that documentation done, and it can be something that everyone has in their back pocket at any moment that they need it, you want to obtain cross-functional stakeholder buy-in. So sharing that documentation with all of those stakeholders you identified in the step previous. Going back to your IT department, your finance department, your analytics group, understanding and sharing what you're trying to achieve and what that dictionary looks like is going to help them support you in that process. And then that's the implementation point. So we recommend, back to that crawl, walk, run approach to establishing data standards. Pick a channel that's going to have high visibility and impact. Perhaps this is the advertising channel that you're spending the most money. Maybe it's actually inside your DAM because you're trying to understand what's being utilized and which personas are being reached by the assets that you have in there. Pick a channel that's going to have really high visibility and high impact. And once you've built a use case there, you can expand your data standards into other channels one at a time. Because what you're doing is you're rolling out that governance, you're doing some internal change management, getting people bought in, and being able to get those people seeing the results of this process as you're going, rather than saying, hey, we're going to boil the entire ocean at a time. Start small, and that allows you to get buy-in, and it allows you to get people to say, hey, I see that if we do it here, it's giving us these kinds of results. Let's expand this into the next step in the next channel. And from there, you can identify if you need to build what we call a Data Center of Excellence. So that's a group of those cross-functional stakeholders that are committed to making sure that these data standards are being applied, used, and aligned consistently across all of your orgs. And ultimately, that's what you need to do to be able to remove silos and be able to really truly work cross-functionally. So that takes us to who we are and why we're having this conversation. So obviously there are steps of that process that you can do without any solution. Identifying your stakeholders is going to be something that you need to do internally long before you bring in a solution like Claravine. But Claravine is the data standards company, and we provide a solution that allows marketers to create and scale data standards globally, being able to empower all of your teams, all of those people who may be acting inside of a silo, to create data consistency before it goes into your systems of record and you're trying to report out on data that may be messy. So we are working with a quarter of the Fortune 100, and we partner with a lot of organizations like Snowflake, Adobe, and AWS, as well as integrate with all of the channels that you're utilizing. So we're here to be a resource and help streamline this process. Obviously, there are aspects of it that you can do on your own, but we are a solution that helps you take that to the next level and really scale beyond just creating that dictionary, but actually implementing it and empowering all of the people who touch your data to consistently apply it.
Great.
So I'll hand it back over to EJ.
Perfect. And what seems like such a fundamental thing for organizations having a data standards practice in place, once you get it in place, the impact of that is incredible. I mean, on average, we see an increase in return on ad spend of 10% or more across our customer set. And when you're dealing with hundreds, sometimes billions of dollars in paid media spend, that is a significant impact at the bottom line of a business. But ultimately, having 99% of digital media tracked to your brand standards, or 100% of all your tagging, tracking, data formats and compliance, again, it allows you to make informed decisions and take a surgical approach to how you deploy paid advertising and all your marketing initiatives, getting the best bang for the buck. And then we've worked with, and we have a number of different case studies that we'd love to share out with other folks, and you can obviously see them on our website. But we work with a number of different organizations, as Ann talked about, over a quarter of the Fortune 100 today. And one of our global banks has talked to us about the massive success that they saw in just a year of working with Claravine. Over 2,000 hours saved across their operations team in the first year alone. So they could deploy these resources into more strategic optimizations and doing things that would have more of an impact on the business than trying to collect the data and figuring out what's accurate and what's not. 33 and 45% reduction in time needed to deploy campaigns through DV360 and their search campaigns, where the majority of their spend is happening. Again, they can deploy resources in other more strategic areas because they have the confidence that these campaigns are deployed in the standards they need to make the right decisions. And then in the first year alone, over $300,000 savings in manual data tracking costs. A lot of this was cleanup, trying to wrangle the data, figure out who owns the data, where was the data created. Sometimes we work with customers that they come to us, it takes them months to produce a report, and we get it down to hours. And this is just scratching the surface with the cost savings that many of your organizations could have with a great data standards practice in place. So to round the presentation off before we head to Q&A, 4 really key things to think about when you're building marketing resilience through data standards. Data standards allow you to defend your investments. So when someone comes to you and says what's working, if you have data standards in place, you will be able to tell them, again, at the surgical level, this is where my budget is working the best. These are how I'm reaching my consumers, getting the best conversions, which then will allow you to optimize spend. Again, we live in this world where the promise of modern marketing is real-time decisions. If you don't have data standards in place, it's going to be really difficult to optimize your spend, understand what is performing best, where you can reach your customers and prospects in the most efficient manner, and then shift that budget around, whether that's paid, owned, or earned. It allows you to maximize your content ROI. Again, seems like such a fundamental thing, but so many marketers we work with recreate the wheel over and over again. They can't find assets in their DAM. They don't know that a team in one region has already created an incredible piece of content or incredible creative asset that's performing incredibly well, because they can't find it because they don't have searchability in the DAM, or they don't know where things exist because they don't have a data standards practice in place. And then last but not least, having data standards, it allows you to act with agility. It future-proofs your business in good times and bads. So you can get out in front of changes that might need to happen, or you can make the right decisions that are going to have the most material impact to the bottom line of your organization. So with that, we're going to hand it over to Mike, our moderator, and hopefully get into some questions from the group.
All right. So we do have some questions. I'll throw out the first question, and whichever one of you wants to answer, you can both answer if you'd like. You mentioned your customers, impressive list of customers. What kind of teams are usually coming to Claravine first, and what problems are they trying to solve?
Yep, great. I can take that one. So typically, the folks that face the brunt of this problem are usually in analytics or data science. Those are the folks that come to us first and say, I need help cleaning up the data. I can't make sense of the data. But it's typically analytics, data science, marketing operations, media operations teams as well. And they're all struggling with the same issue. They might not be able to find creative assets. They don't know what's working in their campaigns. They've had some, I don't want to use the word catastrophic event, but some big event that has cost them millions of dollars. Just by putting some structure and standards in place, they can get access to the data that they need to make informed decisions. But those are the teams, Mike, that typically come to us.
All right, this is the next question is a very important question all the time, but especially these days. How quickly do customers usually start seeing value once they put data standards in place with Claravine?
So I'll go ahead and take that one. So one of the areas that we feel you're able to see the quickest value is actually in your organizational collaboration. You're breaking down those silos internally, and you're able to actually collaborate first and foremost with inside the Claravine platform, but it's saving time so that when your data does move hands and it goes from department to department, no one's wasting time manually fixing errors. And typically what customers see is that time wasted is the accountability of one full-time employee. So being able to say, hey, no one has to fix this. You can trust it when it gets into your hands. That gives you immediate ROI because you're not wasting time and people can move on to their next project with confidence. Now, longer term, you're going to be able to see better measurement, and that's going to empower your teams to make faster decisions and then utilize that, as EJ shared earlier in the presentation, to drive AI. So being able to then, again, lower the human impact of having to manually adjust data and figure out kind of what's the magic behind those numbers to be able to measure, you're able to actually prove out things much faster. And that allows you to be a future-facing leader that's really ready to be an elite team.
All right, I got a question from Caitlin F. Any advice for standardizing data from sources that require manual downloads?
Sure, I can take that one. And obviously there's probably layers and layers to this question, so we're happy to talk off of the webinar to go deeper here. But my hope is that we do move to a world at some point where all things data is automated in and out of the platform, but we still work with the majority of our customers are still dealing with data sets that they have to manually download. And I'll speak from the Claravine point of view, we have mechanisms in place in the platform where you can just automatically bulk upload some of these manual data sets, but still get the value out of bouncing them off of your data standards, your taxonomy, to make sure that it's governed, that it's adhered to the right way, and then getting a file format that is adhered to your data standards so you can bulk upload it back into the system. So, we still live in a world where a lot of things are done manually, but we have processes and integrations that will help take those manual downloads and still get the benefits as if it was an API-based integration. So that's certainly something that we help our customers with today.
All right, AI's come up a few times during this presentation. It comes up just about every day on MarTech. I think it might be our last question. How is Claravine helping customers prepare for AI, and what does that look like in the real world?
Yeah, I can touch on that one again, Mike. So we talked a little bit about this in the presentation. We see this time and time again. Most have tested AI, or they've gone out and they've tried to do something really innovative with AI and ML. But oftentimes the output wasn't great. They could not really establish the ROI. And when we unpack why was that the case, it's because the data wasn't being fed into the LLMs or your AI. It was garbage in, garbage out, right? So a lot of the work that we do with our customers is to help them get that standard in place, which is going to have, as I touched on in some of the slides, a material impact to the output that you get from AI. Simply giving context and metadata to a data set will help AI make better decisions, more accurate decisions. Now, how we look at this from a platform perspective is we are embracing heavily AI and moving to a more agentic world in our platform. So over time, you'll start to see Claravine enabling our customers in the platform to use agents and other automation vehicles to use their data in ways or create data in ways that they've never done before. So we're helping on the front end by just helping data standards, fueling AI, with structured, complete data. But then also on the platform, we're embracing AI as we think about the future and everything that we roll out in the platform.
All right, I think that's about all the time that we've got for today. On behalf of MarTech, I want to thank Ann and EJ for their presentation. I want to thank everybody in the audience for attending, and we hope you join us again soon.